Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of After the Game with Todd Leary as Indiana versus Kennesaw State tonight. Indiana with a formidable challenge tonight, Todd, one that a lot of people may not have thought was going to be like that, but it certainly was. Welcome in, everybody. Of course, brought to you by Hoosier Hanks East over off of College Mall Road. Make sure you stop by and tell Benny and the guys we said hello. Both of us are unavailable to be there tonight, but looking forward to being back there for the Nebraska game next week as Indiana enters Big Ten play, Todd. And Todd Leary, of course, former player for Indiana in the early 90s. And, man, this was one that where this is the score that Kennesaw State wanted it to be. They just wanted it to be the other way around. Right. We're used to running teams up and off, but Indiana, Kennesaw State tonight a little bit.
Yeah, it really did. And this is the kind of game for, especially this season, it feels like Indiana fans are scared to play. I mean, I'm in the same way. The first half, I watched the first 5 minutes, and I could tell Kennesaw State was very comfortable at that pace and shooting that many three-pointers. Obviously, Indiana got off to a great start from the three-point line, and Mgbako making his first four. And you know, that's really kind of what jump-started it for Indiana. Indiana could have easily started out down 10 points in this game tonight. And I don't think any of us would have been shocked. Probably wouldn't have been all that alarmed either yet because they've come back from that so many times already this early in the season. But this was a scary team to play. And you know, I think you're looking at an Indiana team that's much more mature right now than they were a month ago. And this game a month ago, I'm not quite sure this is the same score we see at the end.
No, and I don't want to jump all the way ahead, but there was a point in the second half when Kennesaw State got out in front of Indiana
by 4, yeah.
And Indiana responded right there, a big response. And I'm like, now that's a mark of a maturing team because you're without two big pieces tonight. Kalel Ware did not play for Indiana. And, of course, Xavier Johnson still not back from that injury. We maybe expect him for the Nebraska game. That they're holding him out one more game. I don't know. We'll certainly find out when that comes around. But a lot of other guys getting time tonight. But the start that Mackenzie Mgbako had, from the behind the arc, it just looked so effortless, like you've talked about. He had just such a feathery touch, and then they kind of started finding him on the inside game, and it kind of went away a little bit. But man, then Indiana hit their first 5 3-point shots tonight.
Yeah. And looked very comfortable doing it. None of them were forced. Yeah. Like it was comfortable. But you know, tonight's the first time I think Mgbako, and I've been saying it all year long, if he would make his first 2, he's made his first 1 before, but if you can make that second one as a shooter, it just you're almost already ready to start the heat check mode. And you can kind of tell tonight he wanted the ball in his hands as many times as he could get it to put it up. And I think tonight is really the first time I've seen it in a game where I made the comparison, I think even before the season started, to you, and I think everybody still gives me a hard time for it, but I made the comparison to Jay Edwards in the look of the ease of his jump shot and how smooth and easy his jump shot is. And that's what I always thought about Jay Edwards. And I think tonight in game, I've seen it in practice numerous times, but I think tonight in the game was the first time he's really shown, you know, that pure stroke that he has. And, you know, the more confident he gets, the more Indiana fans are going to fall in love with that jumper.
Yeah, and Indiana, man, talk about field goal percentage tonight was their night, 61%. Of course, most of that coming from inside, but there was some mid-range jumpers. Gabe Cupps early on with that little short mid-range jumper. He pulled up and hit one early in the game to score. So it was coming in all varieties for Indiana, but man, Malik Reneau just wore Kennesaw State out. 13 of 19 underneath, 34 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists. That's a big night's work other than the 7 of 11 free throw shooting.
Right.
He was on par to have him a Jokic type
career
night.
Setting night there. But yeah, you know, Malik was special. You look at the numbers, you know, I think I don't think anyone is shocked. You know, it's obvious, but not very many Indiana players score 30-plus points in a game. It's just not been that big of a thing.
I was going to mention that, not to interrupt you, but is this the third different one or the third time this season already?
Oh, that's good. I actually hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you're right. It doesn't happen that often. It's not. Indiana is not a team. I remember Alan Henderson scored. He might have scored 40 at Michigan State one year, but I mean, he scored a lot, and it felt so awkward. Like afterwards, like we run our offense. Heck, we don't even really realize who's scoring like half the time. Like you don't even really notice it. We'll end the game and Calvert will have 27, and you'll be like, "What?" Like it just didn't even seem like that, but. Tonight Mgbako, or I'm sorry, Reneau was just not forcing it, but knew when it was coming to him. He forced a couple of shots. He had a bad turnover there at the end, and Indiana with a ton. I think their season leading turnovers tonight. I think they have 20 turnovers tonight.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah. But I mean, and when you're playing at this pace, I mean,
yeah, they're going to be a lot more.
If you take it by averages, I mean, how many more possessions did they have tonight than they have in an average game? I mean, that's probably 15 more possessions. So that number.
Well, I know that Kennesaw State averages like 13 and a half seconds per possession.
Yeah. They lead the country in possessions per game. So yeah, it's not alarming. It's not surprising, I guess I should say. Coaches would like to have it be less than that, but it's not. It wasn't crazy. There weren't a bunch of them strung together. I didn't feel like we put them in a bad spot. But, I don't want to go any farther without saying, honestly, it's funny to look at the stat line. But I'm telling you, Indiana fans are so knowledgeable. I think I'm not saying anything I don't think most people don't feel. And that's why I want to say it so early. I thought Anthony Leal was the difference in the game tonight. And he didn't play at all in the first half. He came in. I'm not sure if it's because Mgbako, I heard him say that he was putting a heating pad on his back. So I'm not sure if it was he didn't come back in after that, but that partially that's probably because Leal played so well. And man, I tell you, you can go to a certain possession. Indiana got a rebound and was going to run a play. Anthony Leal hadn't been in the game for 2 minutes yet. And he stopped the play that they were running, called a different play. I think he called chin, which I'm only saying that because it looked like that's what he was doing, was pointing at his chin out there. And everybody changed positions and going to where they were. Indiana came down, ran the play, got an easy basket. And that was a direct reflection of Anthony Leal calming everything down, slowing them down, knowing what play we needed to run because he wanted the ball to be in Trey Galloway. It wasn't for him. I mean, that's how unselfish he is. He stopped everybody to run a play for Trey Galloway and Malik Reneau to end up getting either a drive in the lane or a layup for Malik, which is, I think, what it ended up being. And so, if I will be surprised, and I'm not trying to add any pressure, which they don't care what I say anyway, but I would be surprised if Anthony Leal didn't earn some more playing time with tonight's performance. He was the controlling factor in the game for every minute he was in there towards the end. In the last, I think he played like the last 14 minutes or so of the game. And to me, honestly, he played 13 minutes, and I think they were just the last 13 minutes of the game. I thought he was the difference in the game. I thought Indiana played much better and more under control after he came in.
He has been described as the consummate teammate for the last season, before this year even. I mean, whether it's just sitting on the bench and yelling out defenses or yelling out offensive play sets by the other team, whatever it is he's doing.
Off the bench at a timeout, like always. Like a full team full of Anthony Leals is just, I mean, you can't describe guys who are any more connected than him. I mean, we're talking about a guy who has had extremely limited minutes, not just this season, but over his career. And he came in the game tonight, totally took control of the basketball game and got everybody in their spots, called the play out. You knew Anthony Leal was in control. And that's just the easiest way to put it. And I couldn't have been more impressed with Leal tonight. And I certainly hope that earns him some playing time, because I'll tell you, as a fan, I felt so much more comfortable at the end of that game because I knew he wasn't going to let it get out of control.
Yeah, and he has just been waiting for that moment. Right. And coaches always say, and it sounds like a cliche, be ready. Always be ready, because you never know when your number is going to be called, and he's a guy that's always ready.
Yeah, he definitely always ready, always engaged, always connected. Even tonight, like, it's like right now we're seeing a ton, I think, more than other years in the NFL, where you're seeing backup quarterbacks come in a game and, immediately, run the offense well, be connected. Their timing's great. They were 100% involved in knowing the game plan and all that. And that's kind of the way I thought Anthony Leal was tonight. Like, he probably didn't expect to play a whole lot. He generally doesn't play a whole lot, but man, he certainly, I thought, was the difference in the game. And hats off to him. Everybody wants to have an Anthony Leal on their team.
Kennesaw State, as I pointed out, they hit 17 threes, but not only do they hit 17, they hit like 50%. I forget what it was exactly, but it's right around, or 46%, I think, something.
17 for 35. So yeah, barely under 50%. So, but that's their norm. Like,
and they lost.
I think they average 38 shots, 38 3-pointers per game attempted. So that's not unusual for them. And I thought that the scary part was I wasn't sure Indiana could maintain the pace of scoring that they started out with, making so many 3-pointers. They made their first 5 3-pointers. I mean, Indiana had 22 points, 6 minutes into the game? And heck, we've had halves we didn't have 22 points. And so I was pleasantly wrong and surprised, I guess, at Indiana put up 50 points in the first half, 50 points in the second half. They only shot 9 3-pointers in the first half, and they only shot 6 in the second half. And so got to feel pretty darn good about the way Indiana scored the basketball. And thank you, Kevin. Appreciate your compliment there. But I mean, this game tonight is one. I honestly, at halftime, I was a little nervous that we were going to have to sit here and cool everybody's jets about losing this game, because I was pretty sure Kennesaw State was going to make a bunch of threes in the second half. I wasn't necessarily sure how Indiana would score 50 again. And they did it pretty darn easily. And you mentioned it already to me off air, only missing 12 free throws. And a good majority of those were in the second half. Like, they could have put up 110 tonight pretty easily.
Yeah, and since you brought it up, we might as well talk about the elephant in the room. Man, you cannot miss 12 free throws in a game. I know that they scored a ton of points, and this was but yeah, their percentage, it's the same percentage. It doesn't matter night in and night out. They're shooting about 65% on the year, I think, and this for 64 tonight. It's not acceptable, man. And I'm like, wow, that's going to cost them some games.
It is. That's right. It's going to bite them, and you get to a game where, it's a close game. I'll not to nitpick. This was a good win. This is there was a lot of great contributions. But looking at the stat lines, I honestly don't believe, necessarily reflected how guys played. And I don't really want to seem too negative and pick on him, but Caleb Banks' game tonight was a great effort game. It was an extremely poor mental game. His basketball IQ tonight was a fail. And the play he made at the end of the first half is one that it did not end up costing Indiana. And what happened was Indiana got the ball with 33 seconds to go at the end of the first half. So technically you should be able to take the last shot. If you shoot it in the last few seconds, the other team's going to heave one from half court. So technically you should be able to take the last shot. And Caleb Banks got the ball and drove the ball into the basket to get fouled with 18 seconds left to go in the first half. And he's a 30% free throw shooter. Now, he made both free throws, and Kennesaw State didn't score when they came down on offense. So it did not negatively affect the game tonight, but it certainly could have. If he doesn't make those 2 free throws and Kennesaw State comes down and scores, Indiana's behind at halftime. And that's a big difference. That's not a play you can make. He had 12 points tonight, had 5 rebounds and assist. He made a 3-pointer. Don't know why he took 4 3-pointers. He's not a 3-point shooter. He shoots like 20% for his career from the 3-point line. I'm the guy who wants everybody to shoot 3-pointers. I don't want him to shoot 3-pointers. And I like Caleb Banks' game. I'm not a Caleb Banks hater. I'm the opposite. I love his effort, but he's got to have smarter effort. And here's an example. Indiana fans, love on the Bob Knight discipline and guys played smart and all of that. Caleb Banks would not have had this stat line that he had tonight if it was a Bob Knight coach team, because he would have never played in the second half. After that move he made at the end of the first half, he would have never seen the floor again for the rest of tonight, maybe not for a month, because that's not a play that you can make and consistently win against good teams. And I don't want to get all negative. I like Caleb Banks. Please don't make it out like I'm a hater in that. I love his effort. But, man, he's got to play smarter than he did tonight because he made some real bad mental plays in the basketball game tonight.
Peyton Sparks gets a start tonight in replace of the sitting out Kalel Ware, but he responds double figures, 10 points, and that goes along with Anthony Walker off the bench with 10 points. So you're getting 20 points out of that duo right there tonight in the game, which was huge between them.
And throw Banks in there too, and you got 32 between those three guys. But Peyton Sparks tonight was his
8 rebounds for Sparks.
His name was perfect. Like, he was a spark for this team and coming in, and it was his effort. He did a good job at hustling, coming up with kind of loose balls, being aggressive, being kind of the muscle, the power in there, and just having that second guy. This is what we waited on, I think, from Indiana teams last year a lot. And I think this is what we expected, I guess I should say, kind of the Trace and Race show last year. And Trace was always there, but I don't think Race necessarily always contributed his portion to that duo. And right now, Indiana has had a duo in every game. It's whether it's been Kalel Ware and Malik Reneau, or tonight Peyton Sparks and Reneau, and then the guys off the bench. Like, Anthony Walker has been such a consistent guy coming in off the bench. Man, there are not very many teams across the country that get to bring in a guy like that and consistently give you what he gives you. So, man, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think I would have skipped right over bringing up Peyton Sparks and the contribution I think he made tonight. But, in 14 minutes of play, to go 4 for 4 from the field, 10 points and 8 rebounds, yes, please. As much as we can get that kind of effort from him, that's fantastic.
And Mike Woodson has shown that he's rewarding these minutes. Anthony Walker has become Indiana's go-to sixth guy. Yep. But you see, Sparks got the start tonight. I was a little surprised at that.
Too. Yeah, I was too. And it's hard to tell why. Honestly, Jim, that might have been because there was probably some other games when maybe Peyton Sparks probably should have played a little bit more, but it just, substituting, I think a lot of coaches would tell you substituting is one of the most difficult parts of coaching. Getting the right substitution pattern, not getting too involved in the game. That's where your assistants really have to be on top of it and involved. And that's why I think Coach Woodson's good at keeping the actual rotation that he likes. We don't always like it, but it's much easier on their end for it. But man, this team tonight had a lot of really good contributions, and I'm glad that the guys who got to do that, Sparks, I'm so glad he got to do that tonight, because I think it really will help his confidence going into the Big Ten season.
Yeah, and he enjoyed it. You could tell he was having fun playing the game tonight.
I think when the whole transfer from Ball State, where he was the man, he was one of the top players in that conference last year, and I think this is more of what he envisioned his transfer to Indiana being like.
Gabe Cupps, this was a game that was just way too fast for him to contribute offensively, I think, but he played 26 minutes, so he was out there a good portion of the time. You can't tell it much by looking at the stat sheet, but he's not trying to force things, which sometimes maybe you need to force things here and there. I'm glad he did have that one pull-up jumper that I'm like, all right, he didn't pass the ball, and he took the shot and it went down. So when he hit it, so I'm like, all right, that ought to give him a little confidence boost, but not much.
Yeah, he is. He's still adjusting to the new game, to this speed and this level, and all of the responsibilities that come along with being a point guard. This is one of those scenarios that he would, I think, be a lot more comfortable and farther along if Xavier hadn't been hurt and he was able to play along with him a little bit more. But being the guy that's responsible for having the ball in your hands the majority of the time, it's just different. It takes you out of your your comfort level, I think. And he'll get more comfortable. He's not only, he's much more of a scorer than what he's proven. I watched him in high school several times. He's much more comfortable scoring than what he's proven so far in this early part of the Indiana season. But I think a lot of that comes with he's just not comfortable. You can kind of tell the shot you're talking about that he made was awesome, because I think earlier on in the season he would have driven that all the way to the basket and had to contend with the bigger guy, shot blocker, and all that. He pulled up 3 or 4 feet farther than he needed to. Could have made that like a 10-footer, but regardless, it was in his mindset to not get himself in trouble all the way in at the basket. But his shot in the second half, when he pulled up and took a shot when they were down, he took a shot when they were behind. That's just one that didn't make a lot of sense. And he won't take that shot later on in the season once he gets a little bit more comfortable. But he's maturing fine. When Xavier comes back, he'll be in a lot better shape, I feel like.
Absolutely. And then also Anthony Leal, we talked about him and his contribution, that it wasn't so much on the points and whatever, but there was like the time I mentioned it before we came on, when he was out leading the fast break and he scored his only bucket, but that was because he was busting his butt.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a great assist from Galloway to him. And you're right. That's him running the floor. You're very seldom. You might be able to say he got beat off the dribble by someone on the offensive end of the court or Indiana's defensive end of the court. But I mean, you could say that about Xavier Johnson. You could say it about anybody. A good offensive player is going to beat a good defensive player the majority of the time. And I think that's probably the knock on Anthony. It's definitely not basketball IQ. It's not necessarily shooting or scoring the basketball. It's definitely not passing. I mean, defense would be probably the only real weakness I would say that they could knock on him. But man, you can't keep him off the floor in scenarios like what he did tonight. And I'll be surprised if he doesn't have an earlier entrance into the ball game against Nebraska this week.
Okay, we have to talk about now Kennesaw State. That was their game, and we kind of knew that going into it. But still, Indiana does not have to just let them have that. And there were quite a few times, and I'm not a coach. I'm not obviously not nowhere close to your level, but I saw Peyton Sparks got kind of caught out of position out on guarding, and he went over to help. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Because you know exactly what they're going to do, and bam, boom, three-point shot.
Yep.
And I know that's picking on. I'm not picking on Sparks, but having a big guy out there, that's
it
hard.
Happened to Reneau and Sparks in back-to-back possessions. So yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking. I remember it. I remember what you're talking about, guarding him there at the top of the key, and that's just Indiana does a lot of switching. It's a lot more like the NBA. They do a lot more switching than other teams do maybe. And you're going to run into scenarios like that. But I'll tell you, Jim, like this was almost a perfectly set up game for what Indiana's going to do on the road next week, playing Nebraska, because Nebraska likes to fly up and down the court a little bit. They like to spread you out a lot, like what happened tonight. The good news is they don't have the amount of shooters as what Kennesaw State had tonight, to where they can spray it all over the floor and guys can make shots. There's a couple guys on Nebraska that can really make shots, but for the most part, not near to the level of what Indiana ran into tonight.
Yep. And it's Gritty asking Todd, how many wins will Indiana get in Big Ten play? Because I think she's alluding to what I was just talking about, saying defense matters. It's not that they don't play defense. They have been a little slippery on the 3-point defense this year, because this is like the 4th or 5th different game where teams have been able to take advantage of that. But it's kind of like pick your poison, so to speak, against this team. They're going to kill you on the inside if you do that, which is kind of what Indiana did to Kennesaw State tonight.
Yeah, and you're right. And I mean, the question of how many Big Ten with 20 Big Ten games that Indiana has. I mean, I think they'll win 12, 11 or 12. I mean, is that crazy? Do you think that's nuts?
In the Big Ten?
In the Big Ten?
No, because you're only playing
8?
20, so that's
8?
Yeah, that's definitely doable. But you've got to be on every night because there are no, even though the league is not as good, it's more balanced. And I mean, Indiana is not as good as they've been.
What's the winner of the Big Ten gonna have? I mean, what's the leading team? 3 losses.
What Purdue lose?
4
Purdue
maybe?
lost with 5 games last year.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be that many this year. The Big Ten is not as strong as past years.
They might lose 3 this year.
3, yeah, that's what I was thinking. 4 probably at most. So I mean, if let's say the winning team, which I would have said Illinois might have had a chance to be in that same kind of category of 3 or 4 total losses in the Big Ten, but probably not if they don't have Terrence Shannon. That's probably different. 9 and 11. If they're 9 and 11, I would say that is a definite failure. Failure is not the right word. Underachievement.
And 9 and 11 probably will not get you into the NCAA tournament this year. 9 and 11 will
100% not get you into the NCAA tournament this year.
The Big Ten is not what they've been.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, the amount of quad 1 wins Indiana would have. I mean, think about it. 9 and 11 means they're going to go 7 and 11 because they've already won 2. So they're going to go 7 and 11 from here on out in the Big Ten. That'd be an underachievement, big time. I mean, they've got to win more of their home games. I mean, Indiana starts out with at Nebraska, Ohio State at home, and at Rutgers and Minnesota at home. If they don't win those 4, I would call that an underachievement. They for sure should win 3 of the 4.
Yeah, but, you cannot lose your home games.
Indiana's got a really good chance of starting out 6-0 in the Big Ten. I mean, at Rutgers in a normal year, yes, that game's going to be tough. I'm not acting like we're going to go in there and blow them out. But should we win? Yes. Rutgers is not very good. Like, I know it's a tough place to play. I know everybody says that all the time. They're not very good. I've watched them play a couple of times. I didn't just see them on a bad night. They're not very good. Nebraska, you should win that game. Nebraska's better than normal. But that's a game that you should win. If you're going to finish in the top of the Big Ten,
it's a game you have to win actually to get to the NCAA tournament.
If you're going to win and get to where they want to get to, that's a game you got to win. Ohio State at home, Minnesota at home, you should assume you're going to win those games.
Yeah,
so I'll say 13. I'm going to bump it up. I'm going to go with Kevin. Somebody on there jumped out and said they thought we'd have 13 wins. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to say 13.
Optimist.
There you go. I don't get called that very often, but yeah. Mr. Positive or optimistic.
That was hard to say.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't get that tag very often.
But well, all right. So next up for Indiana is Nebraska. They head to Lincoln, a place that is normally used to be. You write that down as a win. You're like, you would just move on by that on the schedule. Well, not this year. Like you just said, they're better than they have been, but you still have to win this game to go to the NCAA tournament because you still got to go to Iowa. You still got to go to Purdue and all these other places that are going to be difficult.
Yeah, you got to prepare and set yourself up for, having a really bad off night, having more injuries, things like that. Like you got to be prepared to have a loss to a team that you should probably. I see you, Doug and Becky. You got to be prepared to deal with the loss a game you should have won. For an example, at Nebraska, I mean, I would have said this year at Northwestern is a game that you should win, but Purdue didn't win there, so obviously, you can lose anywhere on any given night. But you got to be prepared to lose one that you should win, and you've got to go steal a couple. Going and stealing one at Purdue last year. Not very many teams are able to do that. It's
Indiana goes to Wisconsin again this year.
If they don't finally get over that hump, I'll be surprised because, man, Wisconsin's not very good. I mean, I know they play above their abilities sometimes. Did they beat Marquette? They beat somebody really bad that I couldn't believe. But man, they're not very good.
Well, we'll certainly find out, man. As always, we're grateful for everybody at Hoosier Hanks East, right off of College Ball Road in Bloomington, and look forward to being back there for the Nebraska game. I can't even remember what time that game starts, but it won't be on Big Ten Plus, and it's not on Peacock, I don't think, either way. So there is that. Thanks to everybody for joining in. We're always glad to have you. Normally we go a little longer, but being it's the holiday season, we'll make sure everyone gets out and able to enjoy and have a safe. Speaking of that, happy holidays again to everyone. Happy New Year. If I don't see you before, of course, and I probably won't because, well, maybe I will. I think we will have I think we do have a show on Monday. But we'll look forward to it then. The Todd Father, thank you as always. And thank each and every one of you guys. We appreciate you as always. Look forward to seeing you on Indiana Sports Beat Radio on Monday. So until then, for Todd Leary, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.